This concrete floor looks terrible. It's time to cover it up. So that means it's time for another episode of finishing a room in your basement. And in this episode, I'll be installing flooring. And to be more exact, I'll be installing this luxury vinyl plank flooring. Luxury. Why do they call this luxury vinyl plank? If you guys know, leave me a comment down below. Luxury vinyl plank, or LVP, is very easy to install, looks great, and is very tough. This flooring I'm using is also waterproof. That just means that all the materials used to make this are waterproof. That doesn't mean that your basement can flood with no worries. You'd still potentially have mold underneath the flooring. So you can't use this stuff in a shower, but you can use it in a bathroom. This flooring is made from a scratch-resistant wear layer, a rigid core, and a built-in sound-reducing foam underlayment, which also adds to a softer feel. The foam on the back is nice, but I also like to add underlayment. You can use it on any floor of your home, but it's only required over concrete subfloors. The manufacturer claims that this underlayment will keep your floor 15% warmer in the winter and 15% cooler in the summer. This underlayment costs a lot more than just regular poly underlayment, but it is softer to walk on and it's quiet. It's also a vapor and sound barrier. If you have any old flooring, you're going to want to start by removing that. I don't have any of that, but I do have some existing flooring that I need to splice into. There are a few ways to do this. I've chosen the way that is the most work, but probably the best end solution. I'm going to remove the transition and the quarter round so I can pull up some of the old flooring. This flooring comes apart the same way as it goes together. Work from one side and carefully pull it apart. Try your best not to damage any of the locking features. It didn't quite go this way for me. I ended up breaking a few pieces of old plank, but that's no big deal. I ended up with one section I'll have to carefully splice in, but overall it worked out pretty well. Once this is all done, I'll be able to continue the flooring the same way I would have installed new flooring. Next, I need to get the subfloor as clean as possible. I'll start by scraping off any leftover paint or drywall mud. If you had carpet in this room, you'll also need to remove any tack strips at this point. Then I'll thoroughly vacuum the floor to pick up any loose debris or dust. Finally, I'll mop the floor. While doing this, I sometimes find more spots I need to scrape. While the floor is drying, I'm going to check the floor for flatness with a long level. Ideally, the floor should be flat within 3/16 of an inch over 10 feet and 1/8 of an inch over 6 feet. If it's not, you may need to grind down any high spots, fill any low spots, or use self-leveling compound on the entire floor. In my experience, I found this particular flooring to be a little more forgiving than that. The rest of my basement definitely had areas that were outside that range, but my flooring conformed to it pretty well over time. This underlayment I'm using is also pretty forgiving. It can help smooth out any minor imperfections in the surface. There are also subflooring systems out there you can buy that will allow airflow under the flooring. They can also help keep the floor warmer in your basement. However, these subfloor systems add height to the floor and are very expensive. I don't want to spend the extra cost, and I definitely don't want to add any height to my floor. I also have a very dry basement, so I'll be laying my flooring directly on the concrete with the underlayment. I'm happy with the flatness of the concrete. If you haven't already, caulk any cracks in the concrete with urethane caulk. This was one of the first things I did when I started finishing this room. Make sure you're happy with the amount of prep you did on your subfloor. Once you put the flooring down, you won't want to pull it back up to fix something you could have addressed now. This subfloor is all prepped and clean, so now I can start laying down my underlayment. This stuff is extremely easy to install. It just rolls out and can be cut with a utility knife. It even has its own adhesive on the edges to attach the next piece. If you need to, you can use duct tape to secure any other loose edges. The most important thing is that the underlayment is laying flat with no kinks or ripples. Don't worry about taping the edges near the walls. It's good to leave that open for some ventilation. The flooring and trim will hold that area down. And now we can move on to the flooring. And just like any flooring, I like to let it acclimate for a couple of days before installing. All you'll need to install this flooring is a rubber mallet, tape measure, square, pencil, and sharp utility knife. I also like having a jigsaw or oscillating tool for odd cuts. You're also going to need some 1/4 inch spacers. I like to just use some scrap flooring for that. I'll start laying my flooring right here where I need to splice into my existing flooring. This flooring can be installed up to 6,400 square feet before needing any transition molding. When laying your first row, set the locking end groove on top of the groove on the previous plank. Make sure they are aligned perfectly. I use an extra piece to hold them while doing this. Then lightly tap on it with a rubber mallet and snap it together. Flooring like this will always have a little variation from box to box, so it's a good idea to work from several boxes at a time. Well, that wasn't as fun as I thought it was going to be, but I finally got the transition done from that room to this room. So now I just need to continue laying flooring as normal. The nice thing about this flooring is I can lay it this way or this way, which is pretty much perfect for this situation. If I wasn't tying this into my existing flooring, I would have started on the longest wall. Make sure the last plank will be more than 2 inches wide. When you get to the end, flip the last piece around with the end 1/4 inch from the wall and mark where it hits the last plank. Score the cosmetic side several times with a utility knife and a square, and then just snap it off. Maintain that 1/4 inch expansion gap around the entire room. Use spacers as needed to help maintain the gap. For the next row, use a leftover cut from a previous row. However, the piece must be at least 12 inches. If it's not, grab a new piece. Stagger the joints by at least 8 inches. Push the long side of the plank into the previous row and lay it down. Make sure the end of this piece aligns perfectly with the end of the previous piece. Lay it down, then tap the edge with a rubber mallet to make sure it is locked into place. Continue laying the flooring this way. Try to make it look a bit random while keeping the end seams at least 8 inches apart. When you get to a parallel wall like this one right here, ideally you'll have more than a 2-inch plank on the end. But as you guys know, I'm tying into an existing flooring, so it kind of is what it is, but it looks like I lucked out. Just like the other walls, maintain a 1/4 inch gap. I like to flip the plank over and mark the back side and then transfer those marks to the cosmetic side. Use a long straight edge and the utility knife to cut this edge like you did when you were cutting off the ends. Continue like this with the rest of the floor. Maintain a 1/4 inch gap around any obstacles. I'm not ready yet, but when you're all done with your flooring, install your baseboards and you are done. This floor was super easy to install and it looks amazing. In my next video, I'll be installing my closet door. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss my next video. Also, drop me a comment. We'll see you guys. Luxury. Why do they call this luxury? Luxury.